It's good we don't listen to our introductions, you know. Thanks, Yossi. Thank you so much. And Father and Jerry. I would like to dedicate my words this evening to the Roma people, otherwise known as the Gypsy. I am deeply touched at having been invited here this evening. I understand that... Is that too loud? Is that okay? I understand that there have been some very highfalutin speakers here in the past. And when I read about the individuals who have spoken here before, I thought, whoa. I was quite surprised that I was invited. But I thank you so much for this opportunity. And I must say that synagogues don't really look like this. I always find it a great, wonderful opportunity to come to a church like this. It's just so beautiful and so inspiring. So thank you for that. I was brought up in Kitchener, Ontario. My father, of blessed memory, was the rabbi there, Rabbi Avrum Rosensweig, who died in 1989. And my mother, who should be well, Gittel Rosensweig, was the Rebbitzin. It's very interesting, you know, a rabbi is somebody who decides at some point that they're going to study to help out others. And they go for a particular accreditation, which is called smicha, something that Rabbi Yossi Saperman has. But a woman, a Rebbitzin, somebody who's married to a rabbi, she gets her accreditation through love. She decides that she is going to do God's work based on the man whom she loves. But I must tell you something. Growing up in Kitchener in a rabbinical home with parents like I have and had was the best lesson that I could have possibly had in terms of seeing the world as a young child, understanding it as best as I possibly could according to my age, and recognizing that the fundamental thing in life is empathy, is v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, which is loving your brother and your sister as you love yourself. My upbringing, albeit having some very, very difficult challenges, if anybody here is from a rabbinical family or a minister's family, you will know that they're not simple people. You'll excuse me, the rabbis and father. They're not simple people. They're very complex. Their jobs are 24/7. But that being said, the lessons that I learned and the things that I was privy to and was part of, none of my friends, none of the people whom I grew up with had the same opportunities. My father, of blessed memory, would consistently bring home what many people would call stray dogs into our home. And my mother, really, who was the hero in all of this, as you can imagine, would take care of this person. As an example, when I was very young, my father decided that it was appropriate to rescue this young woman. Her name was Linda, from the Satan's Choice gang. She was a Jewish girl who ended up in a motorcycle gang. And my father told me a story, weaved a very tremendous story about how in the early morning hours he would duck into the hideaway of the Satan's Choice, and he would grab this woman and he ran out with her, and he told the Satan's Choice, you better not come after me, because if you do, you'll be in trouble. Your hideaway is surrounded by police. And of course there were no police there at all, and I have no idea how much of that story was true. But I do know that Linda came to live with us. And she was an obstreperous human being, to say the least. She became part of our family, so that on Shabbat, when we would sit around the table, she was part of our family. And when we would go out on the occasion, she would come with us. And she wasn't a simple girl either, as you can imagine. In fact, the way that she repaid my parents was by stealing their Visa card one day and going downtown to Bud's Clothiers and saying, well, I'm the rabbi's niece, and spending all kinds of money in their store. But the interesting thing about my father and the interesting thing about my mother, she should be well, is that they didn't ask her to leave. They didn't kick her out. They didn't say, you did something terrible and there are no other strikes here. It's time for you to go. There was none of that. And she stayed with us. And she stayed with us for a number of different years. And then, of course, one morning we would wake up and there would be somebody else in the house. My mother told me a story recently about a woman, a young woman whom my father brought home. She was very young. She didn't have any family. She wasn't Jewish. Somehow he had found her somewhere, and she had a lot of physical problems to the extent that she had just gone through surgery and she had a full body cast. And of course, he brought her home and he left her with my mother, and it was up to her to take care of this young woman, already having 4 children of her own, my mother, and pregnant with the 5th, myself. And my mother tells the stories of how she would have to schlep this woman up and down the stairs in order to, make her life happen and find a place for her to sleep. And once again, that she would be part of the goings on in the home. I said to my mother, I said, I really think that what you've done here is unbelievable. The amount of effort and the heroism that you put forward to help these people is so special. And not too many people would do such a thing. And of course, she's a very humble woman, and she looked back and she said, this is what I needed to do. I was the Rebbitzin. I'm a Jewish woman. This is our responsibility. V'ahavta l'reach kamocha. One needs to love their brother and their sister as they love themselves. These lessons never, ever stopped for me. In 1989, when my father passed away, we flew to Israel, and we landed in Ben Gurion Airport. And it was exactly at the same time as Operation Exodus, which was a program to rescue former Soviet Jews from the Soviet Union and bring them to Israel or bring them to the diaspora. There was a woman on the plane, a very heavy-set woman who was probably in her late 80s, if not 90 years old. And my mother saw her. And you'll remember that my mother had just lost my father, the apple of her eye. And for those who have gone through such tragedy in life, you will know that it is probably the worst thing that you can go through. And she stood up and she walked over to this elderly woman, and she said to her in Yiddish, "Ich kann helfen," which means, "Can I help you?" And the woman said, "Please, if you would." And she put her arm, my mother put her arm through this woman's arm, and she helped her get up, and she walked her down the stairs to her new life in Israel. My mother asked me not to tell this story, so I assured her that I wouldn't if she were in the audience, and she's not here tonight. It's her birthday, actually. She's 83 years old. Kenina Hora. But how lucky am I to be able to watch my mother and my father, the 2 most important people in my world. In fact, the Torah says in the very first Parsha, Bereshit, that one should leave their parents' home and find a spouse for themselves. Parents, co-creators. How lucky am I to watch my parents do such beautiful, beautiful things for other people, to make life better, to strengthen it in front of their children. I tell similar stories about my father. For those of you who were born in the Kitchener area, is anybody here from Kitchener or London or Windsor area? You are? So you know how cold it can get, right? I remember when I was 5 years old, the snow was up to here. They couldn't find me for days, right? My sister tells a story, Naomi, that one night on a very cold Friday night that my father and my sister were walking home from Shul, Beth Jacob Synagogue. And as I said, it was a very, very cold night. They walked home, they trudged through the snow of Kitchener, and finally they got home. You know how this story goes, 40 miles, And when they walked through the front door, as they walked through, my father turned to my sister, and he said to her, "You know what? We have to go back to shul." Oh. My sister said, "Well, why would that be?" He said, "We have to go back to shul." So, of course, my sister, being a good daughter, said, okay, Dad. They put their coats back on. They trudged back to shul through the same steps that took them home, cold winter nights of Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And they walked through the front door of the shul. And my father promptly walked to the back of the shul where the sexton was, the shamus, the man who would lock up the shul, the man who would take care of the shul. And my father went over to him, he extended his hand, he put out his hand, he said, you know, I'm sorry, I forgot to say goodnight to you. And the man said goodnight. And my father and my sister walked out, trudged back home in the cold of the Kitchener winters. This is what I was brought up on. This is Tikun Olam. This is repairing the world. And I can't say enough how lucky I feel, how much muzzle I've had to be able to have been born into a family where helping others, where empathy is foremost in their minds, to ensure that when others are in need or when others are suffering, or perhaps even when somebody has felt a tiny little bit of pain, that the rabbi or the minister or the father or the imam, you know, perhaps has forgotten to say goodnight. And we've all been in situations like that, that the rabbi comes back and actually says goodnight. You know, I was a yeshiva bacher in Jerusalem for a year, which meant I attended a Talmudic seminar. And I remember attending the funeral of a very, very great tzaddik, a righteous man. And when they eulogized him, of course they spoke about his brilliance, and of course they talked about his prowess as a Torah scholar. But the main stories that they told of this great tzaddik, of this righteous man, was that when he would walk through the shuk, when he would walk through the marketplaces of Jerusalem, that he would stop at the fruit stands and the vegetable stands, and he would, for a moment, he would say to the individuals who were working very, very hard, he would ask them per their welfare, how are you doing today? Have you ever met anybody who has the ability to remember other people's lives, but not one person, not 5 people, not 10, 20 people, 50 people? You walk with them. I'm sure that, Father, you're like that. You walk with them, and they remember that this person's mother has some heart problems, and this father has cancer, and this person upset because this is going on. These are who righteous people are. And these are the people whom we modeled Via Hafta after, the organization that I run. Because at the core of these individuals is an understanding that Torah is not in heaven. In fact, it says, Torah lo b'shamayim hi. So often in the world in which we live today, fundamentalism is rampant, and people are running to be more strict about laws having to do between man and God. I have to cover my hair more if I'm a woman. I have to make sure that my peyut is longer, my side curls. Kosher becomes an issue where I have to check the lettuce to make sure that there are no bugs in it. And everybody's taking all of this time within these words to make sure that, God forbid, I shouldn't hurt God's feelings. But in truth, the tzaddikim, the righteous people, the good people, the individuals who we look at and we say, these are the types of people we want to be like, are those who understand that Torah, that Judaism, that Christianity at its essence, that Islam, that the concept of I am my brother and he is me, is right here on earth. That we have a responsibility to make sure that if someone is suffering, that we take care of them. In fact, the Torah says not only someone, but if an individual's donkey falls by the side of the road, we have to go over and we have to help pick up that donkey. This is what multi-faith is all about. It is the sharing of ideas, it is the sharing of values, and I would argue that at the essence of it, any meeting that is held, any discussion having to do with multi-faith has to discuss v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that one should love their brother and their sister as they love themselves. We need to understand better every single day what it means to walk in somebody else's shoes. So that if there is a family here in Toronto today, let us say a Roma family, who have been arrested and put in detention because their papers have not been filled out correctly, and therefore are considered to be criminals here in Toronto, people trying, God forbid, to take advantage of our system here, our very generous system. We have to understand that while they suffer, we're suffering. And while we're suffering, we need to accept that it's our responsibility to make their lives better. And in fact, that is what is happening here today as we sit in this most beautiful church. How blessed we are. How blessed we are. Such a bracha that we have to be living in Canada in 2013, to come together on a Thursday night in this splendid church, in a country that is free, that allows us to speak in the way in which we would like, in the way in which we want. We need to remember that only blocks away from here, are people who are living on the street, people who are living in the Rosedale Valley, people who are being put in detention simply because they want the same thing that we have. We can never rest with that knowledge. We can never rest with that knowledge. We need to understand, just as the Jews during the Holocaust said, where was the rest of the world? How was it possible that the Nazis were able to kill 1.5 million children, to kill 6 million Jews, to kill 30 million people? How is it possible that the world did not respond in a much more vociferous manner, was not more awake, was not more conscious, was not denied themselves sleep because other people, brothers and sisters, were suffering the way that they were suffering? This is the world in which we live, the multi-faith world in which we live. This is our responsibility as Jews, as Christians, as Muslims, as Buddhists, as every other religious entity. It is our responsibility to recognize that and not to rest, not to sleep. We need to know that we are doing every single thing that we possibly can to subscribe to the concept in every Abrahamic religion, which is v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that one should love their brother and their sister as they love themselves. I think my singular most important message here this evening, and I thank you once again for this opportunity to state it, is that we need to be louder. We need to be more vocal in this light. Judaism, at my heart, is the most important thing in my world. I'm going to guess that the Christians in this room are here because they love and they embrace Christianity, and they should. And the Muslims here, and the Buddhists here. Anybody who adheres to a world religion does so, in this room, I'm guessing, with all of their heart and with all of their soul. But I think that we're missing something. And I say this to all of us, including myself. I think that we're not being loud enough, and that we're not accepting the blessing that has been bestowed upon us, and we're not taking that blessing of freedom, and we're not marching in Ottawa the way we need to when our current government is saying, no, we're not going to allow more refugees in this country. In fact, we're going to allow less. And we need to face down our MPs and say to them, what happened to Compassionate Canada? Where has it gone? We remember what it was like during the war when our government said none is too many and we're not allowing Jews into this country. In fact, saw eye to eye refugees on a boat like the St. Louis and said to them, well, I'm sorry, this country's not big enough for you and we don't have enough resources for you and therefore we're not allowing you in. It's 2013, my friends. And the same thing is happening today. Unfortunately, it's our responsibility, every single person in this room, and your family, and your friends, and all the people who subscribe to the world religions, to say, no, never again means we'll never allow that to happen. It's not that none is too many. The percentage of refugees that we're letting in that's not enough. It's not enough. It's coming down every single year, and our government is saying otherwise. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. The parsha, the portion that we read last week in Shul on Shabbat said, Kedoshim tihiyu. You need to be holy. You need to be holy because I am holy. This is what God told us. And God gave us a whole list of things in order to live up to that, in order to subscribe to it, in order to become that holy individual that God said we should be. What are they? Honor your mother and father. Make sure that you take care of the elderly. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That when somebody is suffering, you have an obligation, you have a responsibility to make sure that you help them fix their lives. Kedoshim to you. And the very next parsha, last week's parsha was Emor. God was speaking to the Kohanim, to the priests, and once again, God said, you have to be holy because I am holy. That is your singular responsibility in life. Every single action that you take, every single thing that you do throughout the course of the day, wherever you live, whatever city, town, or country that you live in, you have to be conscious of what's going on, not only with inside of you, but also around you. Kedoshim to you, be holy. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You should love your brother and your sister as you love yourself. So that when a boat arrives in downtown Toronto full of Sri Lankans, nobody should have the opportunity to say, these are thieves, like they used to say about Jews. These are bad people. They have come to take from us. These are our resources. We don't have enough in Canada. So these 300 people coming on a boat, the women are prostitutes. You know, the children are dirty. We're going to put them in detention halls, which is what we've done. I could take each and every one of you right now on a bus. We could go together to various different detention halls, which are really jails, here in Toronto, holding refugees for the crime of what? For the crime of coming to this country and wanting to be free. To be multi-faith, to be of a religion, to be sincere about it, to take it in your heart and soul, to accept the teachings of Jesus, to accept the teachings of Moses and Muhammad, is to understand with open eyes and a full consciousness that as long as there are children who are locked up in our city today because of the crime of leaving Hungary, because of the violence there that's perpetrated against them, we cannot sleep. And it's not enough that our synagogues and our churches and our mosques, it's not enough that we speak about it. We need to be more vocal about it. We need to be louder about it. We need to be on the front pages of the newspapers. We need to have thousands and thousands of our neighbors and our friends attending these rallies and making sure that our government does not have the opportunity to back down. And when they try to, we remind them that they're elected officials by us, that this is a democracy. And within a democracy, we are the people. They are of the people, and that is us. I don't want you to think for one moment, God forbid, that I've come here to criticize you. I have not done that. My guess is that the people who are in this church tonight are the ones who do step up. Obviously, you have embraced the teachings of your particular religion, enough so that you understand the importance of such evenings. But what I would ask you to do, particularly the leadership here, in the synagogues, in the churches, in the mosques, is that when statements are made by government officials about the percentage of refugees that we're allowing into Canada that are not true, that we don't allow them to get away with it. That when we hear about stories about refugees who are coming here who are no longer getting medical care because our government has decided to save money by cutting back on funds which had previously been set aside to take care of pregnant women when they come off boats from places in Eastern Europe, to take care of children who have asthma, that when our government decides, no, we're going to save money, but by taking away those funds, by not giving them the medical care, that anybody would expect these people should have. We don't allow it to happen. We don't sleep. We don't sleep because we are so pained by it. That is what our leadership should expect from us, and that is what we should expect from them. That is what Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Jesus and Muhammad wanted from each and every one of us. That is what multi-faith is all about. That is what we're responsible for. And it's painful. It's painful, but such is life. When I spoke at the beginning of my message, when I spoke about growing up in a rabbinical home, and I said it was complex, it was complex. It was very complex. We saw a lot of suffering. I saw too much suffering as a little boy, and my sister saw too much of it. And I'm going to guess that people in this room who grew up in a similar type of home understand exactly what I'm saying. And of course, you want to spare your children from that suffering. And you want to spare yourself. You say, enough, I can't take it anymore. But life is short. And we are blessed. And when I say to you that this is perhaps one of the greatest times in history, and that we are perhaps the luckiest people in history to have what we have, along with that comes a responsibility. Along with that bracha, along with that blessing, becomes an achrayut, a responsibility to make sure that others have the same. So, kedoshim tihiyu, be holy. And understand what that road means, and understand how to get there. And understand that when God says in the Torah, be holy because I am holy, the summary of all of that is v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That one should love their brother and their sister as they love themselves. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have the potential to make this world shine in the way that it can. I know that because I've seen it, because I am so honored and I'm so lucky that every single day when I go to my organization, the people who walk through the front door are there, not because they want to make profit, and there's nothing wrong with profit, not because they are there to be entertained, and there's nothing wrong with that. They are there because they want to help the homeless. They are there because they want to work making sandwiches that we can put on our van, that we can take out into the streets of Toronto, so that when we see young men and young women under the viaduct at Bloor or downtown on Lakeshore under those huge pillars, we have the ability to stop, to ask them if they would like some tea, to ask them for their welfare, to ask them how their lives are, and to look them in their eyes and wish them well. And Perkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, a classic writing in Judaism, says that if you can't give a person a coin, you get down to their level as we would a child, and we look in their eyes and we say to them, and my friend, how are you today? Empathy. There's a beautiful story which is told in a small town, and a man who runs an orphanage. And one very, very, very cold night, he leaves the orphanage and he walks down the street. The streets are empty. And he knocks on the door of a very wealthy man. The man opens the door. We'll call him Mr. Goldberg. I hope you don't mind. He says to Mr. Goldberg, I don't know if you know who I am. Mr. Goldberg says, I do. You're the man who runs the orphanage. He says, Mr. Goldberg, he says, I must tell you, he says, tonight is a freezing cold night, and the orphans are suffering terribly. We never have enough to eat. There are barely enough covers to cover these little children, these beautiful little spirits. And I've come here this evening to ask you for help. Well, Mr. Goldberg turned to him very cold. He says, my friend, he says, if you don't mind, if we could step inside, because I'm freezing. He says, I'm having a hard time talking to you. And the man continues, he says, I don't know if you've ever experienced such a night, but you can only imagine that one only wants to cover themselves, and one only wants some warmth and something in their stomach, perhaps to find some more warmth. Mr. Goldberg says to him, he says, my friend, he says, please, if you don't come inside, I'm not going to be able to help you at all. My hands are freezing. I can barely open them. Finally, the man turns to me and says, my friend, I will come inside. He said, but I wanted you for a moment to understand what it was like to be freezing cold, to understand what it's like for these children every single night. I will come inside, and I thank you for your offer of help. But you needed to recognize that. He steps inside. The man helped him, and of course the ending is always good, and the orphans had a better life. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity once again. And I would like to leave you with a message of Oseh Shalom b'Mermav hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu v'Al Kol Yisrael v'Emiru Amen, that there should be peace in our world. And a thought that inside of each and every one of us is a beautiful gift, a matana, as they say in Hebrew. It could be a gift of speaking. It could be a gift of writing. It could be a gift of interacting with children. It may be a gift of helping others in terms of medical care. Think about your own personal gift. We've all had that thought of why we were put on this earth. Consider what your matana is, and take that matana, take that gift, and use it towards v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Use it towards kadoshim to you. Be holy because you can, and make this world shine in the way that it can. And we all know that it can shine lighter than it has been, but we all know that today it is shining lighter than it ever has. We can do it because we're good people. Because we're here tonight for a reason, not just to listen, but to learn and to know and to actualize. Feel the cold. Understand what those orphans feel all the time. And then take that and turn that into action. Take that and turn that into the action, because that is what multi-faith is all about. Sharing of values, the sharing of ideas, and then standing up and saying, I will not allow one single Roma child to be in detention only miles away from this church. Not one singular person, because that is not what our values are and should be. Thank you very much.